Hi, this is Sean Irvin. I'm the current chair of the Sioux Falls Planning Commission, and I'd like to welcome you to our planning preview. We're currently looking at some projects and some considerations that are coming up for our March 7th meeting. And I've got Jeff Schmidt here, and we're going to talk a little bit about each one of those items coming up on our agenda. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, how are you?
Good to see you. I'm
Thanks.
doing well.
Yeah.
How about you?
Good, hanging in there.
Good to hear it. Well, I see the first thing on our agenda is a rezone from I-1 light industrial to S2 institutional planning unit development for West Benson and North Westport.
Yes.
Can you tell me a little bit more about that one?
So we had one of these items last month, and now this is the second portion of it. Stanford has some land up by the sports complex in this Benson and Westport area. And so we did their commercial rezoning last month, and this is 300 acres. They have 300 acres of I-1. It's south of Benson, and they want to rezone it from I-1 into their institutional land. When they rezone it to S2, they can do just about anything. It's institutional, but they can do office, they can do retail, they can do parks, they can do conservation. But then the follow-up is Planning Commission will see a preliminary plan and an initial development plan where they start to lay out how they want to develop it. But again, as we always talk about in planning preview, the first step with all this is they have to rezone the land so that citizens and decision makers know what land uses are allowed.
Right, and so that sounds like it's a great input. How much does this expand the existing campus? Would you have any reference to that? You said 300 acres. How big is their current campus?
I bet their first one's probably in that 250, 300 acres because they're north of Benson up to 54th Street North, or because they're not quite to 60th Street. But I bet it's about double. It's a good chunk of land. And so they're probably about double the size.
Okay, that gives me a lot better impression.
Yeah, right.
Okay, thanks. I see the next thing on our agenda is a rezone from ag to RS single, or from ag and RS single family residential.
Just about everything in the book.
Right, yeah, I see that.
Yes, yeah, this is on the east side of town. Where are we at? 26th Street and Veterans Parkway. And it's south of the Dowley Farm Complex on the west side of Veterans Parkway. This is 200 acres. And it's really pretty typical to what you and I see at Planning Commission each and every month. As I kind of jumped in right there, because you would have to read this for 5 minutes to explain everything they're doing. But when they bring in a large chunk of ground like this, what we're going to see is they have 200 acres and 100 acres of residential. But then they have apartments, they have twin homes, they have live work, they have commercial, they have office. Because it's on this intersection where they're going to start on the corner, which we always talk about as commercial, and then they're going to go from the commercial to apartments to office to live work into the single family, and then they may have some drainage areas that they'll do to conserve it. So it's the whole development of this land area.
So the area you're talking about, Veterans Parkway, we all know is Highway 11.
Correct. Yes.
And so that I'm pretty familiar with that particular area, and I continue to enjoy the way that Planning Commission and the planning staff always encourages having those commercial areas and the areas of higher traffic use as close to the arterials as possible. Yeah. So lots of logic in that.
Yes, yeah, and then it's really, as we always hear from the citizens after the fact, it's really market development driven, you know. So we've heard on this east side, when are we going to get the next? When are we going to have more? And we're like, look, you need a lot of residential, which they've gotten now, and now that the residential's coming in, there's really more demand for this, as you just said, commercial on the nodes, on these arterial corners.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense. I see the next thing for item number 3 is a rezone from live work and C2 commercial to a few other things at Madison and North Veterans Parkway.
This is a city project, a city initiated project, and it's a drainage way detention pond. And so I can't remember if the developer originally brought it in or if we knew it was going to be ours from the very beginning, but we actually have 2 of these on the agenda. But when these drainage way detention ponds end up getting developed, then we take them over and we maintain them if they're the right size. So citizens always come to Planning Commission and go, there's a drainage issue, well, those drainage issues then get taken over by the city, and we don't need them to be zoned commercial or office. They should be zoned CN conservation. What I always like to talk about is if you're gonna look at a map and you should be able to tell what's gonna happen underneath that zoning classification. Commercial should be commercial, and it should show CN conservation. You should know what's gonna be there. I don't want people to look at a map and go, look, it shows it's gonna be commercial, then why is it a detention pond?
Sure, sure. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay, looks like item number 4 is live work to CN conservation, something very similar to what we just talked about at 57th and Greystone. Is that in the Copper Creek?
No,
area,
further
or-
south.
Oh, further south. Okay.
Yeah, Greystone, those are the big apartments down there at Greystone and 57th
right,
Street. So further south of that, 57th and Greystone, there was an office. It's actually, I think, that big pond.
Yes.
And again, this is the great thing about Planning Preview, is because we're able to show a lot of images. And so there's a large pond drainage area down there that was originally zoned live work that will now make as a conservation area.
Okay, makes sense. And I understand that as those things are developed, it's hard sometimes to tell exactly where the CN district wants to be based upon where everything else is kind of being planned. And so it makes sense that you would do that a little bit later in the process just to make sure it's exactly where you want it.
Those fine tuning.
Right, right. That makes a lot of sense. Let's see, next item is for a rezone from agricultural and RS single family to a whole list of other things at 69th and Southeastern. Tell me a little bit more about
bit west and maybe north, actually south, I'm sorry, of the last one we were talking about, because this is 69th and Southeastern, and they have, I think I count maybe 50 acres. So 50 acres, and it's between the railroad track and Southeastern, south of 69th Street. But now they're ready to really market it and develop it. And as I think everybody in the community's been hearing, there's a need for more housing. And so they're coming in and asking for 24 acres of twin homes and townhomes and 16 acres of single family housing. And so in that area, whereas before it was, like you said, a little bit of everything, now they really want to get it into that single family and twin home market.
Okay, so this is south and west of the roundabout.
Yes.
Is that the area?
Yes,
Okay.
great
Got it.
point.
Got it.
Yeah, so now people understand where it's at, and it's right down there.
We all know where that one is.
Correct, yeah.
Okay, sounds good. Next one that's on our agenda is a rezone from RA2 apartment residential, moderate density, to RT1 single family residential. 617 South Main. Oh, that's right downtown.
Yes. This is a real simple one, and we usually don't bring them on to Planning Preview because you won't have a lot of input. But again, all of these items, if citizens are interested, we like to get people involved. But it's an existing home. A property owner lives in there. We zoned it, originally the city did, and allowed them to have the same rights that they've always had, which is apartment rights, but it's a single family home, and they want to go back to, we just want to be a single family home. And so they're going to rezone it back to residential traditional. It's on a smaller lot, and they want to stay single family. So they have the right to do that.
Sure, that's
Yep.
great. Let's see, next thing on our agenda is, well, actually number 8 and 9 are both an ordinance to the city.
Correct.
Can you tell us a little bit about those?
Yeah, I didn't know what the verb. Frequently, often we bring in, staff brings into Planning Commission, City Council, and the Mayor's office amendments to the zoning code. Over time now, this ordinance has been in place since 2013, and we'd like to update a few sections. The first one's really in regards to the parking ordinance, and then we're also proposing some changes to the on-premise sign code. The parking ordinance change is in regards to auto sales lots, car lots, and how much landscaping they're required. We're separating them from retail establishments, the large stores. So looking at car lots, and as long as they're far away from 250 feet from single family homes, they don't have to have quite as much landscaping. If they're next to single family, we still require the same as what's in place today. So that's kind of how we're looking at it. And then with the sign standards, this really starts to get complicated, but we have signs that are allowed now as yard signs. They're on the sticks, and a piece of paper on a stick, a yard sign, and where you can put them and when you can put them. We're not changing the size or the time frame, but we've changed what they're called because there's been some court rulings on not calling them by what they say on them. That would be a content issue. So again, we don't want to discriminate against anybody and say, well, you can't have that because of what you placed on it. That would be a First Amendment right. They can put what they want on them. So we're just going to say people have a right to put yard signs out and allow them to do that. And so on all of these, what we really want to do is brief City Council and get it on Planning Commission's agenda and see what the public's interested in.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And now you're talking those temporary signs, everything from political signs to signs advertising maybe a realtor or something like that, as well as signs of a painter working in a particular home.
That's correct.
All of those. Okay.
Thanks for clarifying that, Sean, because that's really what we're trying to do. All of those that are out there now, I mean, political signs, construction signs, garage sale signs, those are all still allowed. We're just not going to call them political signs and construction signs and real estate signs anymore.
They'll all be grouped as a temporary sign.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I see our next one is a preliminary subdivision plan for Stanford Sports Complex. Sounds like it might be related to the earlier item we talked about.
Yes, it absolutely is. And, we don't get a lot of input on these when they come to Planning Commission or City Council because people are really interested in the zoning. But preliminary subdivision plans are actually what they are. The preliminary, early in the process, subdivision of the land. Where are the streets going to be? What's the contours? What's the lots going to look like? Where's the pipes going to be for water and sewer? And so they start to lay out how their land's going to look. And they do that. And for this one, it's again that 300 acres up in the northwest part of town.
Right, and this, from my experience, has been a way that the Planning Commission can verify the assumptions made very early in the zoning process and make sure that it looks like that's being developed along those same lines, right?
And it really helps the decision makers, City Council and the Planning Commission, at the public hearings and later when citizens come in and go, well, if you're going to put a commercial building here, a whole bunch of housing here, how do we know someone looked at the traffic? How do we know someone took care of the drainage issues? And we say, the engineering design standards look through the subdivision ordinance, and it was on this agenda.
Yeah, and I think that's a great point.
Yeah.
And we notice in our updates, there's always a SIRE update, S-I-R-E.
Correct.
Can you remember what that stands for?
It's the technology that we use. It's the firm, the corporation that runs that software, and you buy it. And so it's just basically electronic transfer of how we look at plans.
Right, and it verifies that everybody that has any concern with it at all has verified, reviewed it, and confirmed it.
Yes.
Correctly?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Very good, thank you. Looks like our next item is the preliminary subdivision plan for Dakota Prairie East Edition at 69th and Bahnson. Similar to what we, or similar area anyway.
Yes, similar process and description that Sean and I just talked about. This is in the southeast part of town at 69th and Bahnson. Single family, twin homes, some apartments, but how are they going to lay it out? What are the lots going to look like? Have they looked at the drainage, the traffic flow?
Okay, very good. And then we're ending our agenda with a couple of conditional use permits, both related to alcohol beverage within 500 feet of a sensitive use. Talk about those two.
Conditional uses are always at the end of the agenda because we go through the rezonings first and conditional uses are last. They're conditional uses because they're only going to be permitted if they address the issues and conditions can be added if they're necessary to address any of the impacts they may have. So on this first one, it's on East 10th Street, and it would not be required if it was outside of 500 feet from these single family homes, but since it's closer than 500 feet, they have to have this public hearing. It's On the south side of East 10th Street, and again, you'll see the video and you'll see the images, you'll see where the location is, but there's been casinos there before. There's already on a busy arterial street, but we have to have the public hearing to see if there's any standards or requirements that the public would like to address that can be measured and understood that we can enforce that may want to look at this casino.
Mm-hmm. And we've seen some of those in the past, as I recall, that people have had experience with maybe a casino or something else that's been in that location before, and so they bring forward some commentary that ultimately we can respond to and maybe improve things a little bit from what it was last time.
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts? How about this? Or did you have?
We have this one
about the last one.
The last one is on West Madison Street. Same thing, a conditional use within 500 feet, and it's very similar. It's where there's been one before, and as Sean said, we want the public to come in and give us that input on that conditional use. So.
Okay. And then Jeff, I know we've been working on this annual report for Planning Commission. Do you want to brief us a little bit on what all was determined as you look back at the last year?
Yeah, it's very interesting. You know, on an annual basis, at the end of the year, beginning of the year, we try to look at what the Planning Commission has done over the last year. So some of the quick things that I found out is that Planning Commission had 142 items that they reviewed last year. And items are the things that we just went over, those types of items this month. Typically, we do 12 items a month, and our busiest months are March and September. And on those months, which are spring and fall, which is, again, you don't know that until you really look at an annual report, but we're not busy necessarily in the dead of winter, but people bring a lot of items before us right in the spring, getting ready for summer, and they bring them in the fall, trying to get ready for this new construction season. So that was interesting to see again. Of the 142 items that we had and that we, Planning Commission, brought forward, we had 5 items that got appealed to City Council. So again, something interesting to go back and look at. Appeals are, Planning Commission will make this, rezonings and preliminary plans automatically go to City Council, but there may be some decisions that either the applicant or property owners adjacent may still not agree with, and so they can appeal it again to another hearing at City Council. And of those 142, only 5 were ever appealed. And then there was 1 out of the 142 that was overruled by City Council of the Planning Commission.
Oh, really?
So that was very interesting. You sit there, you know, again, hindsight being 2020, they're always like, you remember what everything was so controversial last year? We had all these issues and there was all these problems. And you're like, yeah, it was really just, there was one item. And so again, reflecting upon what was last year. The other things I thought were very interesting that the citizens may not know is we ask our planning commissioners to go to a lot of meetings. You also have the opportunity to go to Minnehaha County Planning Commission meetings every month and Lincoln County Planning Commission meetings every month. For Lincoln County, there were 8 conditional uses and a rezoning, and for Minnehaha County, you had 15 conditional uses and 2 rezonings last year. So, and then I put that all into a document. And
yeah, I think my sense is we've done a lot more activity with Minnehaha County and Lincoln County and those kind of fringe zones than we've ever done in the past. It just seems to continue to grow as the growth of Sioux Falls uses those kind of interstitial spaces a little more heavily.
Yeah. And people are always looking for that next area. You know, we always talk about, you got the urban area, the city, you got the county, and then you have this fringe area, this joint area, and they're like, well, let's go out there. Well, even if you're out there, we work together with the county, and there were, you know, 40 projects that you had to cooperate with the county on over this last year, and that's pretty typical. And I don't know if the citizens understand all that, but it's there. So a lot of activity that you deal with every year.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, it's always interesting, and always seems like we have a lot of things to consider. We hear from a lot of citizens, everybody on the Planning Commission. We welcome that input, especially at a public meeting is the best place to do that, so that everybody on the Planning Commission can really hear that kind of commentary.
Right.
I think that really helps everybody, and you know, our big push, and I've said this many times, I think, as we're considering things, is trying to balance property rights with neighbor rights. We always want to come with the best possible balance between those two things. We can't side with just one side. We always have to consider everybody.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Okay, well, thank you, Jeff.
You're welcome.
I think this is a great discussion, and look forward to next month.
Yeah.
Thank you. Hopefully you can all attend our March 7th Planning Commission meeting, and we welcome all input. Thank you.